testified earlier that you were previously Mac Baller Brim. Why did you switch to Sex Money Murder? I wanted to be from a gang from my neighborhood. How did you turn Sex Money Murder? How did you turn? Yes, Your Honor. How did you switch affiliations so that you were in Sex, Money, and Murder? I called out to a friend named Pootie, and I told him call CB for me. And what happened after that? I told him to tell CB that I wanted to turn Sex, Money, Murder. To your knowledge, did Pootie get in touch with CB? Yes. Did you talk to CB after that? Yes. What did you discuss? He told me yes, I could come into the gang and welcome to the family. After that, did you consider yourself part of Sex, Money, Murder? Yes. And when you introduced yourself in prison, how would you introduce yourself? C-Stacks, Sex, Money, Murder. Is there any advantage to being in a gang in prison? Protection, phone, drugs. So let's break those down. What do you mean by protection? You and your homies stick together in jail. And when you say homies, who are you referring to? Other blood members? I believe you said phone as well. What did you mean by that? Run the housing area. The guy would control the phone. And I believe you also said drugs. What did you mean by that? We would get drugs that get into the jail. Mr. Lopez, once you became a member of Sex, Money, Murder, did you learn background information of the gang? Yes. What kind of information? Where it started, the oath, codes, the lineup. Let me start with where it started. Well, first, actually, who gave you the information about the gang? Another blazer in Rikers Island. What do you mean by blazer? A blazer is a nickname for Sex, Money, Murder member. Who was the blazer on Rikers Island who gave you that information? Clive. And what did he tell you about how the gang started? Started in Soundview. What, if anything, did he tell you about who started the gang? Pistol Pete started the gang. Do you know Pistol Pete's full name? Peter Rolak. Who is Peter Rolak? The one who started Sex, Money, Murder. Do you know where he is from? Soundview. Do you know where Pistol Pete is now? In jail. Why is he in jail? Objection, Your Honor. Overruled. Do you know why he is in jail? For murders. I believe you mentioned the oath earlier. What did you learn about the oath from Clive? I only remember bits and pieces of it. Could you give some examples of the bits and pieces you remember? I remember it said to ride with my 2 guns stacked high, never take the stand on your man, and in the name of Pete we rise. I'm going to take those one by one. First, what did you understand to ride with your 2 guns stacked high to mean? Just to protect my brothers in Sex, Money, Murder. What about never to take the stand against your man? What did you understand that to mean? Never snitch or cooperate with the government. And the line, under Pete we rise. What did you understand that to mean? Shouting out Pistol Pete's name, who started the gang. Is it important that a Sex, Money, Murder member know the oath? Yes. Why is that important? So he know how to carry himself as a blazer. Now, I believe you also mentioned codes. Could you give me an example of a code you learned? Double O, Moet, Rolackin. Let me stop you right there. So first, what does double O mean? It means like negative, like no, no good. And I believe the second code you mentioned was Moet. What does that mean? Like a female. And then you mentioned roll-ackin. What does roll-ackin mean? Like hanging out, chilling. Mr. Lopez, are you familiar with the term Pete rolled? Yes. What does that mean? It means murder. Are you familiar with the term 5 Love? Yes. What does that mean? Probation period. Are you familiar with the term drop your flag? Yes. What does that mean? Step away from the gang. Are you familiar with the term GWAL? Yes. What does that mean? Jail. Now, why does a sex money murder member need to know these codes? So other people won't know what we're talking about. Now, in addition to these codes, are there greetings specific to sex money murder? Yes. Could you give me an example of one of those greetings? 64 grams. So if you said 64 grams to another sex money murder member, what, if anything, would they say in response? Dollar bill. And what does 64 grams refer to? Just drugs. What about dollar bill? Money. Could you give another example of a greeting? 2 guns up. So if you said 2 guns up to a sex money murder member, what would they say in response? Triple homicide. Do sex money murder members have a handshake? Yes. Could you demonstrate that handshake? When you shake somebody's hands, it's like to be with somebody and make a gun and put it to your chest and put it against the other person's hand. So just to break that down, what is the first step? You shake somebody's hand and you lock the B. So may the record reflect that the witness is making a B with his hand. And then what is the second set? Make a gun, put it to your chest, and put it against the other person's hand. If you are not a sex, money, and murder member, are you allowed to use this handshake? No. Are there any sex, money, and murder gang signs? Yes. Could you demonstrate one of them? You make a gun. May the record reflect that the witness made a gun from his hand. Mr. Lopez, I would like to now show you what has been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 301. Do you recognize that photograph? Yes. Who is pictured in that photograph? Me. Is that a fair and accurate depiction of you at the time? Yes. Your Honor, the government offers Government Exhibit 301. Received. Ms. Corrado, could you please publish that to the jury? Mr. Lopez, what are you doing in that photograph? I'm throwing 2 guns up. And what is 2 guns up? It's a sign for sex, money, murder. So earlier you mentioned the lineup was something you learned when you joined. What is a lineup? A lineup is a chain of command. Is there one lineup or more than one? More than one. Can you give examples of some lineups? A lineup for Rikers Island, a lineup for the New York State prisons, and like the original lineup that will never change. What is the original lineup that will never change? Royal flush. What is the significance of being on a lineup? Your status. But what does it mean for your status if you're on the lineup? You will be considered a big homie. You mentioned the Royal Flush lineup. Who is at the top of that lineup? Pistol Pete. Who else was on that lineup? BMO, Mac 11, CB, and Nut. Now you mentioned that certain lineups were for prisons. Is there a lineup for outside of prison? No. Why not? CB told me he didn't want to make one because it would be easier for the feds to indict us. So to be clear, the lineup for prison, are those in written form? Yes. Putting aside a written lineup, is there a leadership structure for sex, money, murder outside of prison? Yes. Who was the leader of sex, money, murder outside of prison when you joined the gang in approximately 2011? Corey Brown. How did you know that? He told me. Why do sex, money, and murder members need to know the lineups? So they can know who is who. How does a member get the status that elevates him into a lineup? By putting in work. What does it mean to put in work? Sell drugs, make money, care for somebody, take a plate, show your loyalty towards the gang. You mentioned plate. What does that mean? Plate is like the order to kill somebody or cut somebody. We will turn to that in a little more detail later. But now I want to turn to membership in sex, money, murder. How does somebody become a member of the gang? Someone with status or someone on the lineup will bring them into the gang. Is there a term for having the ability to bring someone into the gang? Green light. How does the sex, money, and murder member get the green light? From someone on the lineup. Now, you mentioned that Brown said he was, I think, the leader on the streets when you entered into the gang. Did you ever have a discussion with Brown about how he got his status? He told me it was inherited to him. What did he say about that? That his older brother and Pistol Pete were cool back in the day when the gang started, and his brother got murdered, and he took his brother's position. Did he say what his brother's name was? Bear. Now, Mr. Lopez, generally, how does a person rise in status within sex, money, murder? By putting in work. Now, you mentioned that putting in work could include killing somebody. Do you know of any examples where somebody rose in status by killing somebody? Yes. Could you give an example? Objection, foundation. Sustained. Lay a foundation. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Lopez, do you know from personal experience any examples of how somebody has risen in status through killing somebody? Yes. Could you give that example? Myself. Have you also heard from other sex, money, and murder members about other people rising in status by killing somebody? Objection, hearsay. Overruled. No speaking objections. Mr. Lopez, I will repeat the question. Did you ever learn from other sex, money, and murder members about somebody else rising in status by killing somebody? Yes. What did you do? I learned Mac 11 killed somebody for Pistol Pete, and he rose in status. What was the status after the murder? I just know he was in the Royal Flush. And how did you learn that? From other gang members. Mr. Lopez, did you and Brown ever discuss whether Pistol Pete himself had a reputation for violence? Yes. What did Brown tell you about Peter Rolak? He just told me back in the day that he used to talk about murders like it wasn't nothing. What was Brown's demeanor when he was telling you about Peter Rolak? Like happy about it?